Okay, stop. Get him nervous. Thank you, all of you who've spoken today. It's so great to be here. As many of you know, I first came to this country in 1963 when I was just 22 years old. You see how old I am now. I came by ship. I landed on a dock on West 46th Street, just 4 blocks from here. And all these years later, I have to tell you, it's still a thrill to be in this city. I could not have imagined then, of course, that I would be standing in front of my writing project colleagues and the best college, university, and K-12 teachers in the United States. As I mentioned earlier, I will be leaving my position as Executive Director at the end of this year. Several drafts of this speech have already ended up in the recycle bin as I struggle to find elegant ways to say thank you to the people who helped me, to state some of what we have accomplished through the Writing Project Network, and to talk a little bit about the future. It's been my great fortune to be associated with NWP's legacy of teaching, learning, writing, and leading. So let me begin by thanking all of you and your Writing Project colleagues back home for making this possible. Jim Gray, the founding director of the NWP, had his own challenges of leaving the leadership of the NWP in 1994 when I arrived in Berkeley. In my early days in California, I met with Jim every week to discuss ideas about the teaching of writing, but mostly we discussed teachers. Jim told me countless stories about great teachers he had known and what belief and trust in teachers can accomplish, if you've seen that, to try and capture some of the big ideas that had shaped his vision and the people who were part of the ongoing development of NWP's core principles. The best way I can think of to thank all of you for the opportunity to learn from and with you throughout my past 29 years of involvement, ever since the founding of the New York City Writing Project in 1978, is to reflect on some of these core ideas and to relate them to the future of the NWP. So let me begin with the principle that Jim and I talked so much about and that I first learned in this city. That is to listen to teachers and to really hear what they have to say. I learned what this principle means from my many colleagues in New York City: Sandra Pearl, John Brereton, Carla Asher, Elaine Avedon, Lynette Moorman, Ed Osterman, and Marcy Wolf, to name just a few of the earliest and most influential colleagues on my work. What did I know about schools in the United States? I had been given a second chance at real learning here when I arrived at the City College of New York. But I had not stepped into a K-12 school anywhere since I was thrown out of my own high school in London. I always think, well, my teachers must be like revolving in their graves to see what I did. What I didn't know about schools then could fill several volumes, and what I learned would take a full series. New York teachers taught me well, and I used the lessons that I learned from all 5 boroughs, from Bronx and Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and Staten Island, every day. These first New York City Writing Project teachers invited me into their classrooms. They taught me how to see teaching and learning, and they conducted the first in-service series for the project with me in tow. And the New York City Writing Project has provided continuous high-quality professional development for New York City teachers each year since 1978. And they haven't stopped learning. Which brings me to the second principle. In order to stay relevant, to meet the needs of young people, learning has to be at the heart of our enterprise for both adults and students. That means that if you're a writing project director, a professor, a K-12 teacher, if you believe that you already know everything, you need to know about the teaching of writing. The Writing Project will not really help you. Sandra Pearl and John Brereton gave me a list of articles and a book or two they said I had to read before I would face 25 sharp, tough, and demanding New York City teachers in the 1978 Institute. But what embedded that learning for me was my own writing. And as you all know, writing is truly at the heart of our success. Thus, learning means that writing teachers must read and write. Over the years, I've shared with you a few of the books and resources which have made a huge impact on my thinking. And you have produced articles, books, web resources, blogs, podcasts, and more. all in response to reading, writing, and thinking about ideas that support real learning for today's young students. I think it's time we claimed this shared legacy too. We are readers and writers. You'll be relieved to know that I'm not about to launch into a list of recommended books or anything like that. I simply want to thank all the authors in this room and beyond for the deep scholarship, the thoughtful commentaries, the new research, and outstanding literature which make our collective efforts to improve the teaching of writing part of that endeavor. A fourth principle, one highlighted by Anne Lieberman in her research, is that all of us are needed to guide the enterprise. Learning is both an individual and a social activity. Writing project colleagues have guided me every step of the way in my learning, never more so than when I began my cross-country journey to California in 1994. Writing project directors welcomed me to their sites, their homes, and their communities. It was great. I just went from state to state, trying to get a free meal in each of the writing project places. And we even found great bagels in Oklahoma. I mean, that was a surprise to me. That was great. I've now traveled to all 50 states, Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, visiting writing projects. And that was a goal of mine, and I just got my last state last year, Alaska, so I finally got to Alaska. Now, as you also know, we have a site in the US Virgin Islands, but strangely, so many people wanted to go and do the site visit there that I got shut out, and I never got to go. Since I was totally urban, all I knew was London, New York City, and a handful of other big cities. I had a lot to learn. And what I learned is this: the writing project model works in every community, in every region of the country, and beyond with our new international sites, simply because the model is built on sound principles of learning. There are teachers K-16 in every community who are deeply committed to their profession and to ongoing learning. The value of the project is the network, and the value of the network is the people. In today's language, we are a social network that values knowledge, development, research, and writing. And here I'm also indebted to Mark St. John and colleagues at Inverness Research, who helped make our own data visible to us and provided critical analysis to our network as we scaled up the work. And to Ellen Nolan and colleagues at Washington Partners, who've helped us learn how to advocate for that scale-up and to provide clear information to policymakers. And they really did teach us. I mean, here's how you go in, here's what you have to say, keep it short. They had attention span of a flea, so you know you've got to really work quickly. So all of that was extremely valuable. Developing a way to see the network in the same way that the model guides us to really see teaching and learning took some time. And here my memory may not be quite accurate, but hey, it's my memory. Anyway, my memory is that in 1986, the original idea for getting the cities together, the first meeting of the Urban Writing Project sites, was Joe Chex, who was then the director of the Boston Writing Project. Joe said, let's get together. Yes, indeed. He is a great and valued colleague. Let's get together, he said, and see if we can help each other and see what we have in common. We raised money, we got together to study our classrooms in our cities, and we learned a very important lesson. When our schools have problems, it may not be the mayor's fault, or even the local district or the superintendent. We learn to think systemically. We learn to think outside of our neighborhood, even when the neighborhood was as big as this city. For in the end, all this work is collaborative in the deepest, most personal way. Urban sites helped me understand work beyond New York City, and the National Writing Project helped me see across the nation. But what gave me confidence was knowing that this work does not mean working alone. From across the United States, people came out to help me on my journey. I'll give you a couple of highlights. I had a 4-day car trip across Alabama and Mississippi, visiting sites with Sherry Swain. Then she was then the director of the Mississippi Writing and Thinking Institute. She gave me a cram course on rural education. It was quite wonderful, illustrated by teachers, schools, project workshops. And then I had a 2-day visit with Joy Alberts, then the director of the Oklahoma State University Writing Project. And she gave me my first and only ride on an air-conditioned tractor. So everywhere I went, I learned 2 things. First, the amazing generosity and caring of people in this community for their students and their students' lives. And two, understanding that the Writing Project works in every environment, in every context, and with every kind of teacher and student. And by the way, I also witnessed the great love people have for their own community. In every case where people live is almost without exception the best place in America to live. And I saw that in time and again. And you know, you spend a few days and you actually start to see through their eyes. You say, I could live here, this would be fun. So that's the other thing I learned. Arriving in the Bay Area, I've got to thank more mentors. Miles Myers, then Executive Director at NCTE, but formerly of the Bay Area and California Writing Projects, and Marianne Smith, Carol Tatesi, Sheridan Blau, and many others who were willing to engage me and talk, argue with me sometimes, spirited. And from what I learned from them, I learned the new ideas, I received great advice and direct help. Expanding, building, and strengthening the NWP was the work when I arrived in California, and it's the work we continue to do every day. And I could go on to name and thank the extraordinary staff of the Writing Project. They're literally the best people I've ever worked with, and they work tirelessly on behalf of our network. They bring an extraordinary array of talent, from the latest in computer programming to deep knowledge of writing, research, and professional development. They are a force to be reckoned with. And finally, my thanks go to Dan Bogan and all of the NWP Board of Directors. You've pushed my knowledge into new areas, you have challenged my thinking, you've insisted on transparency in all issues, and on behalf of the entire network, I'm grateful for your commitment to the NWP through this leadership transition. And I cannot thank you enough for your collective efforts on our behalf. So let's take a look now and see where we've been and how we're doing. In 1994, our budget was approximately $2 million. It's now 21.5. We were a loosely coupled network of local sites with strong local programs in many cases, but few opportunities for network-wide learning. Over the last 14 years, we have reviewed sites annually, provided technical assistance where necessary, and built a network that's stronger than ever, now with nearly 200 sites across the country. We're dynamic, we are growing, and we're active, and we are still working to put a Writing Project site within reach of every teacher in the country. Groups of our sites are at the center of the most challenging issues in education. Site leaders and teacher consultants are focusing on adolescent reading and writing. They're learning more about teaching English language learners, finding ways to support new teachers, and addressing myriad problems that are at the center of schools everywhere. Well, what we know from the legacy study is that, though it is still a fairly guarded secret, the NWP is also about leadership. And while writing and the teaching of writing are at the heart of our work, it is in fact the leadership of the extraordinary people like you that makes the work come alive for teachers and students. Our legacy study makes this point over and over again. Over 90% of Writing Project teachers still in education in one form or another. But there are also challenges. There are challenges to our mission and recent work with the National Commission on Writing, sponsored by the College Board, has been useful in identifying some of them. How to develop in the mind of the public the idea that writing, not just reading, but reading and writing are central to human development in the 21st century. How to keep writing on the national agenda without it becoming subject to the narrow and restrictive ways that people will judge progress towards full literacy. How do we work to prevent restrictive pedagogies taking hold in the absence of good professional development in those areas? And how do we prepare for the full use of digital tools by teachers and students in all parts of the country? And lastly, how can we develop the ability to change writing assessment when it is poorly done, whether it's computerized or not? Despite these challenges, there is finally real recognition that we as a national network are a powerful resource for knowledge on a range of issues important to education and literacy. And perhaps what's even more important, we are viewed as a partner in the creation of new knowledge. It has probably always been true that local sites have been recognized as the local experts in the teaching of writing. But it's also been true that many of our directors and lead teacher consultants have national recognition for their work and contributions. But it is a different thing to say that the network itself is understood as a knowledge-making enterprise. Much of this new recognition has come because our national programs, our resources, our publications, and our research have demonstrated the potential of the network in areas as diverse as support for new teachers, working with English language learners, and improving the uses of technology in the classroom. The NWP is not asleep. I would be surprised if you were surprised by anything I've just mentioned. We are a nimble, dynamic network. We just have to ensure that we collaborate, disseminate, and implement what we learn works best for students. Sooner rather than later, there will be a new Elementary and Secondary Education Act, a new NCLB. I hope the changes, particularly around assessment, are workable, and above all, fair to the array of students whose backgrounds and talents are as varied and complex as theories of education. Technology tools are truly a gift to those of us who teach literacy, and as I've said before, writing is everywhere in the cyber world. But to paraphrase Churchill, never have so many written so much for so few. For who is reading? Who will listen and take notice? How can this new democracy increase participation of all groups in all of our political and social processes? We as teachers can surely carry that message. Perhaps then we will begin to see a society where voices from every sector in our community are heard, acknowledged, and listened to. Perhaps then the ultimate reason for education in the vision of John Dewey is made real, and we will have a democracy much closer to those ideals. A democracy much closer to the vision that brought us into this profession, and closer to the true purpose of creating an educated, informed, and literate populace. Finally, I want to thank all of you for making my career such a joy. I never dreamed work could really be like this. I never dreamed it could be so much fun. I never dreamed that I would have a position that would allow me to be among the most honorable people in the most honorable profession who have allowed me to serve them in this exciting and fulfilling way. Thank you.